as things stand, potential applicants submit reports from their own specialists, doctors, therapists and so forth, and then they are evaluated by the National Disability Insurance Agency. But from mid-year, there's a new process. Applicants will undergo an independent assessment by a contractor employed by the government. Now, the government says that'll be free of charge, last about 3 hours, creating an easier, streamlined process. But advocates worry that the new system is invasive and doesn't give those assessors a full enough picture of an individual's needs. Dr. George Taleporos is the acting chair of the Victorian Disability Advisory Council. He participated in the pilot process for the new independent panel assessments, and he says it was a very confronting experience.
So it goes about 3 hours, and the questions are very repetitive. They're very personal. One example is that I've just met this person, and they asked me about whether I need support to have sex, and I'm not entirely sure why I'm being asked that question. But when I was asked it, and as I was answering it, I was explaining that I did need help, and I felt quite ashamed. And I know that's wrong. But I felt quite embarrassed. Part of the assessment process, and I was told this from the outset, is that they need another person that knows you well to talk to them in a room that's separate to me. But the problem is that people who are in my life that know me well, they don't feel comfortable talking about me without me. They feel that's wrong, and to be honest, so do I. The problem that we have is that the decision about this was made with very little consultation, and that's a problem. And I want to work with the government to get to a point where we have a process, that's fair, that's effective.
OK, Craig, let's start with you. I mean, George is making the point about, a horrible and traumatic experience being asked by a stranger, do you need help to have sex? Do you have sex? Can you wash all parts of your body? But he was really insistent that he wanted that last point that he was making in there, that wants to work with government to get this right.
I mean, are we really at the point where disabled people have to talk about their sex lives in order to receive disability supports? I mean, we would not accept that in just about any other area of life, and certainly not for other government programs. I mean, Centrelink will ask you if you're in a relationship sometimes to determine your access to supports. I mean, what this started out as, I think, was a well-intentioned reform proposal from David Tune to provide people with access to expert assessments that would help them to access particular and make their case for particular kinds of support and equipment. But it's turned into an access gateway for the whole scheme, and I really do not understand what problem it's trying to solve. Like, all of the evidence is that if there's this kind of fraud and malfeasance in the NDIS, it is happening from the provider side, that it is not happening in terms of people who don't need supports suddenly deciding that they want to buy a wheelchair. I mean, why would you?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just outraged about this. I think it's unnecessary and increasingly inappropriate. And each time we hear more about it, it gets worse.
Yeah. Oliver, can I turn to you? I mean, like George, you wanted to, be really constructive about the NDIS, and you said to me that it's been an amazing set of reforms for you. But just talk to me about, what's at stake when you go into those meetings to advocate for yourself for the supports you need to live a productive life.
I think the issue I have still with accessing support and funding is we're talking from a deficit point of view. So we've got to always tell the departments what we can't do or what we're not capable of, so we can increase and get access to the funding that we need to live our lives. And I think that needs to change as well, that it's not from what we can't do, let's focus on what we can do. And this conversation's been happening for well before this and well before I've been around. So I think that's what worries me, that we're still going to be having these sort of conversations in a year or 5 years or 10 years. But I feel like, yeah, the NDIS was a great reform, and it's given me access to supports that I'd never had before it. But yeah, the deficit language is the issue for me, and we need to change that conversation.
And you also talked to me about it's a lot of physical effort to keep showing up and answering sometimes silly questions. What's the silliest question you've been asked?
Well, I guess it's along the lines of what's already been mentioned. It's can you tie your shoes up? How do you go to the toilet? Can you do that? How do you go to the shower? And it's like those sort of things we figure out on our own, and we can do that, and we find out how to do that. But I think that's the questions that we get asked that you wouldn't ask anyone else in any sort of format or any meeting, and I'm not sure why we've still got to answer these sort of questions. And I think back to the physical effort, and when you go into these meetings, I feel like we're always getting ready to sort of battle and fight, and we're always sort of can be on edge. And I've been in these meetings where you're ready to get a bit hostile, and you sort of can get your emotions sort of keep them in check, and be a bit tough. So I think that's the issue that a lot of people have, is that we're always sort of have got to be fighting and ready to fight for our rights or advocate for ourselves. And some people aren't capable of that, or just don't have the energy to do that.